Hi, welcome to another episode of Entrepreneur Tips. So this is tip number 8, it's startup valuation. Okay, so this is a topic that a lot of people that want to do a startup, they don't think very much. To be fair, I worked on this concept, the way I approach this topic on my own, I worked out on my own, and this is the way I approach a company, at least at the early stages. Okay, anybody who's done a startup before and they've done exits, they're a lot more familiar with it, with all the finances around the startup. So what is evaluation? Evaluation is how much your company is worth in money. What a lot of people who want to start a startup don't realize is that a company has value even pre-product. Okay, generally there's different stages that we recognize in a startup. So there's the typical ones are pre-product, post-product, pre-revenue, post-revenue, and no traction. Okay, so even if a company hasn't yet, even if you haven't yet designed the product, the company still has a monetary value, it's still worth something to investors, and there's a way in which investors will value your company, and depending on how they evaluate it, they'll give the equivalent investments on it, which is a really important thing for somebody to consider. Then that's how I approach it. And now about this, there's two main things that play a key role. For one, I mean, I found that generally at the moment in the EU is much more conservative than the US. So basically, where you get your company valuated plays a role into how much investment you're going to get, because they're going to evaluate it at a different amount. So generally, I mean, the US tends to be very conservative, and they generally want to invest sometimes post revenue, not even post product. They want to go post revenue. They might even check the revenues. That's one problem. Whereas in the US, generally investors are a lot more open to risk. There's good reasons why investors will want to get in early. Obviously, you get different types of investors. At a different stage, you get angel investors. At another stage, you might get venture capitalists. But they can get involved. Angel investors who get involved at the early stage, they might get involved easier, I think, in the US than in the EU, or even for the same kind of company. And the total amount that they might value your company is also going to be different. So, for example, it might be that if you get your company valuated in the US, they might valuate it at $2 million, whereas if you get it valuated in the EU, they might valuate it for a total of $1.2 million, which is significantly different. So there's one choice to make. If you're going to meet investors, should you go for the US or should you go for the EU? You might think that you want to go for the US because basically you get more money for the same amount of equity. And here's the other. There's a direct. This really affects how much your company is valuated. It really affects how much investment you're going to get, because it's a very straightforward mathematical calculation. Say if an investor gives you 100,000 euros for 10% of your company, that means they evaluate it at a total of $1 million. But if they give you 200,000 for 10% of equity, they evaluate it at $2 million. So, going by that rule, what I think is I always want to increase the valuation of my company at any stage. So it's a key question I always ask for whatever I do, and I say, okay, is that going to increase the valuation of my company? And if yes, then I'm going to do it. If it won't, and if it will drop it, then I will not do that. So there's in order to calculate the valuation of your company, there's a few different models. There's about 9 of them. There's a Berkus method. There's a discounted cash flow method. There's a scorecard methods. There's about 10 of them, and some of them are more suitable for early stage startups, which are pre-product. The Berkus method and discounted cash flow are probably the best ones to use. Generally, a startup can be evaluated even when it's pre-product, it can be evaluated up to $2 million, depending on a few factors. Okay, so what I'm looking at, as I said, I'm looking at how will I increase the valuation of my company So how do I use this information in order to get a better valuation? Okay, I look at the factors which affect how this valuation is done. They're free, they're all available online. For example, the Berkus method, one of the factors is management team, which is also an important thing on its own, since what really is going to give success in the company is having a good management team, basically good founders and anyone who's chief in the team. Because whatever obstacles will come, it's these people who are going to always overcome them, and whatever needs the company has, they're going to find ways to cover them. For example, if my product is not doing very well, and okay, it's not the kind of company which is all engineering, I can get a new engineer. Okay, if I need more advertising, I might pay some advertisers to do more advertising. If I need more promotion, I might find some growth hackers and get them to promote my company on social media, or use growth hacking methods and so on. But if the management team gives up, then the whole company gives up. So investors are going to look. I understand that investors are going to look very well at the management team in order to determine the valuation of my company. And for this reason, when I'm going to choose a management team, I'm going to choose really good people. Ideally, I would rather choose people who are experienced with startups, who have done, say, 2 or 3 startups, and potentially they've done successful exits. They've done multi-million exits about 3 times, as opposed to, say, choosing a student. Yeah, for anybody who would choose a management team. Whereas if I'm going to choose, say, an engineer, and the engineering position is not one of the management positions in my company, then I might just choose a student, because that does not affect the valuation of my company. They're not in the management team. Okay, so again, in short, these are the two decisions I always make. As I said, this is my approach. Okay, whenever I do anything early stage, I think I know the factors. These are the factors that affect my valuation, and every decision I make, I always think, and will that affect the valuation of my company? Okay, and the second thing is, I'm going to decide, as I said, where I'm going to look for investors from, because I know that if I go into the US market, there's a higher chance for to give away the same amount of equity of my company for a higher amount of investment, for more money. I can get, say, 200,000 because they're going to evaluate it at 2 million, whereas if I go to, say, Europe, a conservative place in Europe, they might offer me 50,000 for 10% of equity, which means they evaluate my company at 500,000 or 1 million, which is a lot less. Anyway, I hope you enjoy these tips, and I'll see you all soon. Let me know what you think in the comments.